big welcome to you as we move into Series 2 of Experience Living Purposefully into Your Very Own Story. Series 2 has 10 experiences, numbered 11 to 20. And each one of these experiences is about some aspect of how my very own stories interweave. And the particular aspect for Experience 18 is of awakening to inner self-awareness wipeout. So again, we have this image. Sit comfortably on your chair and leave all else's distraction as you let this image reveal to you its message in this now. Do other parts of your inner being have a comment about what is revealed? Hold all that has been revealed gently and note any feelings you have about the whole or any particular point. When the time is right for you, let your awareness return to the energy in the room. Take one more moment to ask yourself, how was that for me? And perhaps a word, phrase, sense, image emerges. And perhaps you'd like to make a note of it. And I have a note. You have just engaged your observer self. Here we have a summary of previous experiences. There's a survival strategy which builds up as we cope with our perception of an imperfect world. And I'm calling that outer world stance within the person. And then we have private self, patterns building up in the background. And this had an inner self-awareness wipeout. And then under that we had pools of pain. There have been several experiences in this series too. And now another experience dealt with dream energy arisings, archetypal arisings, about pausing and noticing tingles and clangs and nudges and niggles. And so this is gathering all of those pieces together for how do the two mountains come to be in harmony. The two patterns get to be integrated at least somewhat. Well, I'm calling it's through metaphor and story and vicarious experience. We see vicarious experience, a hard word. We hear another person's story and it triggers off something in us. That's what's triggered off in us is vicarious experience. It's not our basic experience, and yet it highlights experiences that we have that parallel the other person's story. In summary, everyone's story is everyone else's story with a different flavour. And I'm calling that the aesthetic self, that part which will present metaphor and grab hold of it, grab our inner attention, invite us, and it's got more than in it. It doesn't come from what we decided to do. And now, in the stories that we've had in Series 1 and 2, we have examples of how the hidden self, the inner self-awareness wipeout, came into awareness and got integrated into conscious living and could then impinge on the outer world stance or the first survival strategy. So here are some of those stories. In the killer whale story, the image that was described of the person being on an ocean and the whales, killer whales just below, ready to devour her, that was produced in computer collage. And as soon as the person saw it, she said, "They're caricatures, they're in my mind." Now, that was metaphor and dream energy arising. And she was present to it. And that led her to put the actual words that were paralysing her, like "I'm not good enough," as a pattern, a pulling down pattern, to put those in the whale's mouth, which made it real. And that new image then took the power out of the pull down energy, and in the long run she came to a new way to move forward, which is all I have to do is stand up. So this, what was hidden about not having confidence, got integrated into ordinary life instead of being hidden in the unconscious. I'm giving several news stories about how aesthetic self connected me for those two parts and patterns. So, in my 30s, I drove out to school with the principal of my school. I knew that this principal could get to the essence of things. And I knew as a principal, she very seldom got cranky. I'm not saying she wasn't firm, but she very seldom got cranky or showed crankiness. So one day we're driving out of the gate and she saw in the rear vision something happening in the school grounds. I stepped out of the passenger side and dealt with the problem. And when I got back into the car, she said with a really, really cranky tone, "I'm just sick of these better than Pollyanna statements." Now, we never talked about it. But because I knew she got to the essence of things, and because I knew she was never cranky, I knew there was something in me that was putting her on edge. So there was insight there, and what grabbed my attention. And I stayed with it. And out of that, I realised that what was putting her on edge was I was not integrating the negative parts of life, the parts of life that I didn't like. I would fly off into cloud nine, better than Pollyanna. That is really something, to be better than Pollyanna. How insightful she was, and how much of a gift she gave me through speaking how it felt for her. So in that case, my aesthetic self connected something that I wasn't aware of and allowed me, when I accepted the invitation, to integrate it into my life in a more balanced, to bring more balance to my life through my listening to the tone and picking up what my inner attention pointed out to me. So at 44, this is a dream way that the dream arising used my aesthetic self to bring parts of me that I didn't know about into awareness, and then I had the choice to integrate it into life. So here's the story. I made a retreat when I was 44, and the director at the beginning of the retreat said, "Dreams could be important. Perhaps have a notepad so you can jot them down, even when you're half conscious." Little Miss Me, know-it-all, in my mind, said, "I don't think so." And metaphorically, I threw that idea out the window. Well, you can be sure that I did have a dream during that retreat. And fortunately for me, that director was able to unpack the symbol, the pointer, and the invitation in dreams. And so when I had the dream, I remembered it, and I didn't have the pad, and I didn't write it down, but it was strong enough for me to remember. I shared that with him, and he gave me the main facets of how to come to be present to dream energy. And the invitations for me were to integrate playing in my life. I had not played since I was 10. I had sensed that I was grown up, and I threw out my childhood, buried within me in the deep unconscious. So one thing was that, hey, you haven't played for 34 years. How about getting it started? Which I have been trying to do. Easier said than done, but I'm still working at it. Another message in that dream, another invitation in that dream was to leave others free to live their lives and not solve their problems, sometimes even before the person knew they had the problem. And a third invitation in that dream was pointing out to me that I never even thought of asking for help. So since that time, when I'm under pressure, I think, is there any way that I can get some help? Doesn't come automatically because it was a pattern that was in the unconscious. However, I have integrated those three wonderfully balancing invitations into my life. At 49, I did the Enneagram. And there I found that as a 5 really resonated with me, that I would never feel that I knew enough. And that was really the story of my life. However, another feature of the 5 behaviours and inner reactions is that other people looking on understand and see that they know more in common situations than those around them because they process information and are observant. That's their way of living. So I thought to myself, this is a bit stupid. I never feel like I know enough, and yet other people see that I know more than most those around me about common topics. So I decided from then on, my life changed, that whenever I was asked to do something or there was an invitation from inside or outside to do something, that I would go with what I knew and not allow that fear to paralyse me, the fear of not knowing enough. Another one which happened around about the same time, I applied for a job and I got it. And that was the first time in my life that I had applied for a job, even though I'm 49. And so I had a friend, and I knew my friend would feel that it would trigger off his low self-image. Okay. And so I thought, how can I let him know that even though I'm going to hold this position, it won't change who I am, and from my point of view, it won't change that our friendship could continue. So I went through this whole process and had this serious conversation, and I'm very serious because I'm pussyfooting around. I didn't want to trigger off his low self-image. And I got the surprise of my life. When I'd finished my well-planned out spiff, he said, "Where's the joy?" So I learnt something. If you make a decision, leave the old pullback patterns behind. And after that, I decided that when I was moving forward into something new, I would go to it with my hair flying. And then we come to 71. This is the last story where I'm quoting examples of how our aesthetic self can invite us to new patterns. So, in my inner reflecting, it had been there, a message that it's okay for how life is happening for you. That had been there for about 10 years. However, when I was 71, in a reflection time, something happened that I really felt it right deep down that it was okay. And when I felt it deep down, I knew I had been waiting to hear it's okay for 61 years since I was a 10-year-old. When I was a 10-year-old, I had gone into adult behaviour. And that adult behaviour, in the 10-year-old view, was a really stepping out and pushing the edges. And all my life then, because I lived in that adult mode, I was pining for that adult approval, that it was all right. And the mystery of life gave it to me when I'm 71. It was actually there, but I hadn't cottoned on. So, for me, the message is it's okay to operate, push the edges out of your own authority of who you are. For me. Now, none of that happening could have happened in any of the stories I've told you without the person going into being their observer self. And so here I have a pattern of this all that we've been talking about in all of these experiences of Series 2. And the whole picture as I've got it is really my metaphor for the free-flowing human energy patterns, more than interacting with us, we embracing the more than, listening, pausing, the different parts of us and how they connect and how the patterns build up. There's time now for you to let surface one or more ways in which your aesthetic self connected an outer world stance pattern of yours with an inner self-awareness wipeout pattern. Perhaps speak or write what surfaces. In this mantra by Monica Brown, Fashioned and Formed, we get a chance to savour the fashioning and forming that has happened of us in our skin. And it also highlights how yours and my aesthetic self connects more conscious with less conscious patterns. Fashioned and formed. fashioned and formed as earthen vessels, fragile and easily broken, yet holding a treasure, a wealth untold. As earthen vessels we are, as earthen vessels we are.
Fashioned and formed as earthen vessels, fragile and easily broken, yet holding a treasure, a wealth untold. As earthen vessels we are, as earthen vessels we are, fashioned and formed as earthen vessels, fragile and easily broken, yet holding a treasure, a wealth untold. As earthen vessels we are, as earthen vessels we are.
My summary. Our aesthetic self provides the means for outer world stance patterns to be expanded and come to balance. This happens when we recognise and accept invitations to awaken from our inner self-awareness wipeout patterns. There's a strategy to increase our awareness of our aesthetic self invitations. Gift yourself with 7 to 10 minutes at the end of the day, allowing invitations within the experiences of the day to surface. Gently notice and receive what surfaces, and perhaps speak or write new information. The next morning, gift yourself with soaking in and accepting whatever invitation surfaced the night before. Has Experience 18 expanded your awareness of when inner self-awareness wipeout is awakening? Perhaps speak and or write what surfaces. Experience 11 of layers of feeling reactions in my very own stories that are stored. Experience 12 of how a first pattern of feeling reactions is repeated and becomes a survival strategy to cope with an imperfect world. Experience 13 of how survival strategies impinge on life and living. Experience 14 of inner self-awareness wipeouts in my private self arena that are at first unconscious. Experience 15 of pools of pain. Experience 16 of a third layer of me in my skin. Here, archetypal and dream energy arisings are invitations to inner growth and balance. And experience 17 of a dual patterning of growth, which is basic to the process of being birthed to wholeness and balance. And experience 18 was of awakening to inner self-awareness wipeout. So, the what and how of harnessing inner energies to unlock wisdom? Experience 19. Thank you so much for listening to that inner urge which led you to experience 18.